So what you're seeing right now on the screen is an empty motel room. And I think a lot of the businesses in the United States thought it would be a phase and then eventually we would come back. But in this video, I'm going to show you an interview that the local Seattle media conducted with this Travelodge general manager. Now, we've heard from him before because I guess he was interviewed by other news stations. But this interview is a little bit different because in this interview, you can kind of tell something's a little bit different in his voice. I don't know if it's like pain or defeat or something like that. Also, I have a report out of Bellingham, Washington. And if you're from where I am in the Lower Mainland or like British Columbia, you're probably going to know what Allegiant Air is. And they just announced that their crew that's based in Bellingham is all going to be let go. And sticking to the west coast of the United States, Oregon is also now sharing their pains when it comes to the tourism season. So we'll get into all of this in this video, and let's start off with the one first out of Seattle.
A new report from Oxford Economics commissioned by the American Hotel and Lodging Association and the Seattle Hotel Association shows just how big the industry's impact was last year. Hotel operations and visitor spending generated $8.3 billion in economic activity, supporting more than 37,000 jobs and bringing in $1.4 billion in tax revenue. But despite that strong showing, Seattle's hotel industry is hitting some headwinds.
I'm surprised that after 14 months, they're just calling it headwinds. It should be like a Category 5 hurricane right now. Because you just experienced spring, summer, fall, and winter in 2025, and nothing has changed, and in fact, things have actually gotten worse. I really wish the US media would take it seriously instead of just kind of saying, oh, this is going to be a blip or a hype or temporary thing. But at the rate we're going, we could be 3.5 years into this orange guy's term, like in the future, and they'll still be saying that the United States is going through a little bit of a blip.
Being in a ship sailing into a headwind, it's going to just make us slow down or fall backwards.
Chris Tudor, the general manager of the Travelodge by the Space Needle, is in the same boat as other hoteliers in the city.
Margins are so thin anyway, and the expenses are growing, such as labor, insurance, property taxes, supplies. They're all going up. So that equation doesn't work out very well when the revenue is falling and the costs are increasing.
Now, I want to pause here for a minute because he did mention margins. And one of the things I have seen in my comments, as well as like people sending me emails and questions and saying, GTL, we've only seen like maybe reports of, anywhere from 10 to 20%, maybe 25% decrease. With these small percentages, are we actually making an impact? Well, I'm going to say that we are. Because let's not forget that some of these businesses, whether they're hotels, restaurants, or shops or whatever, they do have high overhead. And some of their margins are pretty small. So even a 10% decrease in customers or sales can be drastic to a business. I bring this up because this general manager of the Travelodge actually mentions this stuff. Because what I normally see in the reports is the business owner or the CEO or anybody that's in the capacity of the business is saying it's just going to be a blip, we're doing fine, or the Canadians will eventually come back. So the fact that this general manager actually lists that, hey, our margins are small and we're actually in trouble, I give this guy props.
The American Hotel and Lodging Association reports Seattle's hospitality revenue dropped about $45 million last year, down 2%, largely because of fewer visitors and a steep drop in Canadian tourists.
They do not want to come south of the border. They are our number one contributor to our guest profile. Every report we pulled, number one country always. And for that to be absent is very difficult.
He says his hotel has been down 5 to 20% each month since October, a steady decline he's felt since November 2024.
This is the worst we've seen it, even during COVID.
Do you see what I mean when I said I could sense the defeat or the pain in his voice? But I mean, to compare the situation to COVID, where the border was not even open, it kind of tells a lot. Now, I had mentioned in the past that I actually have stayed at this Travelodge. Back in the late 2000s, early 2010s area, back when I was single, my friends and I would go to the United States and we'd have like a weekend there, go to a nightclub and bars or whatever else. And when we go, we're not just booking one room, we're booking like maybe 3 or 4. And what I do specifically remember is all the BC plates that were in the parking lot. Not just the parking lot, but even driving on the way down. You're taking the I-5, there's BC plate, BC plate, BC plate. So all of this Canadian traffic that they were so used to before is no longer going down. And it's now starting to reflect when it comes to accommodations. You just got to listen to the right person.
What a lot of us are thinking, we never thought lodging would be in the state that it's in right now. And this does feel worse for lodging than COVID did.
Anthony Antone, the president of the Washington Hospitality Association, acknowledges times are tough, but says there's reason for optimism, from the upcoming FIFA World Cup to a newly passed bill that funds statewide tourism and marketing.
Help us start generating tourists again for the future. And that kind of promise does bring us hope.
Reporting for King 5 News, I'm Brady Wakayama.
I'm sorry, but hope doesn't really cut it. I hope I win the lottery, but it's not going to happen. But once again, a tourism official banks on the fact that the World Cup is coming to their city. Okay, they might get some domestic tourists coming in for the games. And you know, the World Cup's like, 1.5 months or something like that? But what happens after that? Because the global sentiment when it comes to the United States is not getting any better. And you know, this is just my guess, but I think the World Cup is going to be very underwhelming. So we'll have to see how this goes. And I'm actually really curious to see what the tourism officials, what their next excuse is going to be once the World Cup is a bust. Now, before I move on to the next topic in Washington State, I would like to give a thanks to Jim on Blue Sky, and he tagged me in a bunch of photos. And this one is out of Halifax when he was on the ferry. I didn't know where to put the co-host, so I made a little bit of a modification to her graphic. But thanks, Jim, for tagging me in these photos. Now, sticking to Washington State, it was just announced that Allegiant Air will be letting go of their crew that is based in Bellingham. Now, if you're not sure what that means, let me read this article out to you. I'll read parts of it out. Bellingham International Airport has been informed by Allegiant Air that it will close its crew based in Bellingham in November 2026. Importantly, Allegiant has confirmed it will continue operations on all existing routes and maintain its current flight schedule in BLI. BLI is the airport. An airline crew base is the location where pilots and flight attendants are permanently assigned and where their work rotations begin and end. While the closure of the base changes the crew scheduling, it does not affect the flights available to passengers. Allegiant will transition to a turn-based model, where the crews and aircraft operate routes from other bases without overnight stays in Bellingham. Now, if you're not from British Columbia, you might not be aware of where the Bellingham airport is. It's about maybe 20 minutes drive from after the border. And a lot of Canadians and, people from the lower mainland would actually choose to fly out of Bellingham to go to Las Vegas. I've done it plenty of times, probably at least a dozen times. And by doing this, you're actually saving quite a bit of money. It could be anywhere from like $200 to even $400 versus flying out of YVR with Air Canada and WestJet. I remember the parking lot would be filled with BC plates. But my guess now, it's not happening anymore, which is probably a contributing reason why Allegiant has decided to close their base in Bellingham. And in this Reddit thread where I actually found this article, someone posted, "We had dinner with an Allegiant flight attendant last night who confirmed that they were pulling out of BLI and she's out of a job." Another post here saying way less Canadians using Allegiant to go to Vegas. Last time I passed Bellingham Airport, the parking lot was mostly empty. Go back to 2022 and 2023, it was packed. You had to reserve parking or stay at the Hampton Inn for the night and then pay them to reduce rate parking. So this is just another example of how Canadians were helping the border towns, financially and economically, and all of that has changed now. Now, I want to move on to the next article. It's out of Oregon, and it's titled, "Oregon Tourism Hit as Canadian Visitors Pull Back Amidst Tension." Now, I'm not going to read the whole article, but if you want to read it on your own, as always, the link will be in the description below. But I wanted to show this part here, and I'll read it out. Canada has accounted for 29% of international visitors spending in Oregon in 2024, spending the most out of any other foreign group at $211 million that year, making it Oregon's most important international tourist market. The article then goes on to talk about the tensions, and it actually does mention the 51st state, so I do give the author credit for that. But I wanted to show this part to actually show everybody how much Canadians contributed to the state of Oregon. $211 million in a year is not a small amount. Let me read this next part out. "We receive emails from Canadian visitors that shared with us a very strong desire to come to Oregon," said Todd Davidson, the Travel Oregon Executive Director. "Some had been to Oregon before, some were planning their first trip to Oregon, but they just didn't feel they could at this time. Air travel to Oregon's only international airport reflects that downturn. International arrivals through the Portland International Airport fell from 65,500 in 2024 to nearly 58,000 in 2025, a 21% decrease, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That includes about 32% fewer Canadians who flew into Portland Airport last year in comparison to 2024. Now, one thing we have to remember is that a lot of Canadians will actually drive through Washington State and Portland to go to California. Now, personally, I can't do that. I can't stay in a car for more than 4 hours. I don't know why, but I just get really restless in the car. But by driving through, Canadians are still spending money in Washington State as well as Oregon, even if it's not their final destination. So I'm not surprised to see these numbers, but I am happy to see that 32% fewer Canadians flew into Portland. Now, I know there might be some people that are going to say, what do you have against Portland? I actually don't have anything against them. But I do have something against the US administration, and many who put them in there. When I first started this channel, I'm not afraid to admit that I was a little bit naive. I went in with a mentality that I would still support blue states, Washington State, Hawaii, Oregon, California, and all the other blue ones. But each state still has its fair share of orange guy supporters. So unfortunately, there's no way to separate that. If a bully's left arm is not punching you, but the right arm is punching you, it's still the same person. I've had this analogy in my head for a while, and I'm not sure if it came out properly, but I hope you guys understand what I mean. But I guess the one thing I could say to these US tourism officials and executives is that it was good while it lasted, but it's never going to be the same again. So a question for everybody watching right now. Will things ever go back to normal for you when it comes to the United States? Will you ever go back there, even if there is a Democratic president in the office? Many have said that this is generational damage that has happened. And, I actually agree with that. So let me know in the comments below if this is your stance as well. Okay, that's all I got for this video. If you found any value or agree with anything I said, or you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective without the US media bias, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. That way you'll be notified of my future videos. And if you want to see more of my videos, check out the ones that'll show up on your screen shortly. Thanks everyone. I'll catch you in the next one.